Hi guys, welcome to episode 2 of the Teesside Business Podcast. Today we're lucky enough to have Paul Card from Paul Card Recruitment on. Thanks very much for being with us, Paul.
You're welcome.
So, for those 3 people in Teesside business who don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself and your business, Paul Card Recruitment.
Me or the business? Where do you want to start?
We'll start with you.
Okay. Born and bred in Norton. Still live in Norton. Moved away for a brief period when I went to university down in Hertfordshire, but came back home. Grand plan was never to open a recruitment business or even to go into recruitment.
Okay.
I was actually supposed to be jetting off around the world.
All right.
But lo and behold, I walked into a recruitment agency one day and was sold the concept and career of a career in recruitment.
Yep.
Didn't tell them at the time I was supposed to be going travelling around the world, and the trip never happened and recruitment did.
All right, okay. So how did you go from there to deciding to start your own recruitment company? Was it a case of, is it a popular thing within the industry? Do people think that they can do it better or leave? Or did you see a gap in the market? Or
I think it is a popular thing.
Yep.
I did 9 years with a national recruitment business, so I felt that was a good training in what to do. I'd always specialised in the market that we currently operate in as well, and always within the North East. Reason for me, as I suppose a lot of people, was family.
Yep.
I was predominantly travelling to Newcastle and working out of their Newcastle off at the time, but living in Norton. A little boy came along and he was a difficult little lad, and I felt it was the right time for me to make that change. Initially looking for perhaps a better work-life balance. That quickly went out the window as the business started to grow.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is an industry with relatively low barriers to entry. So it's very popular industry for people to start up from the back bedroom.
Mm-hmm. Going a little bit more on that then, because obviously we've had previous discussions around recruitment and your specialities in it. Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing to have a low entry level to be starting recruitment? Do you think there should be more regulated if you could start a recruitment company? Or I know the reason I say it is just because I know from first hand the way you do recruitment is very, very different how other companies do it. So when I suppose everybody who's listening who's owned a business and have ever had any interactions with, most people think recruitment companies is just simply they just send you CVs, but I know yours is very, very different. So how is the setup that you have very, very different from them?
Going back to the regulation question.
Yeah, sorry, that's a bit of a question.
It's a difficult industry to regulate.
Mm-hmm.
There are basic checks.
Yeah.
A lot of firms aren't members of the largest trade body, which is the Recruitment and Employment Confederation. We are, and always have been from day one. They have a code of practice and code of ethics, which I think is very important to make sure that you are delivering the right level of service and undertaking the relevant checks for candidates that you should as a responsible recruitment business. How do we do things differently? I think it's probably the time and effort that's put into finding the right people.
Mm-hmm.
We are not a fastest finger first. Our solution is not quick. It's really getting the skin of the business to understand their culture and using some tools to understand the behaviours that might be required for success within the role, in addition to CVs. Coming back to the point about recruitment businesses and who to use, there's lots of options, but perhaps not enough emphasis is placed on, from a company's perspective, in my opinion, actually pre-qualifying the recruitment business you want to work with. Recruitment is one of those processes within business where it's absolutely vital to the success of an organisation, but invariably people don't want to do it. Businesses could do it themselves, no doubt about it. It's easy to find and identify the right talent. It's hard to engage with them, and that's where it comes down to simple hours of hard work. So there's no quick fix, in my opinion. It is hard work, hard graft, and doing the basics very, very well. But in terms of businesses, what they could do is probably pre-qualify their recruitment supplier a little better, look at the quality of the adverts that business writes, look at the processes of that particular business, how they find the right people, what do they do to make sure that the people that they are putting forward to a business are the right ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about finding the right recruiters for that type of business. Paul Card Recruitment focuses on primarily the finance sector.
Mm-hmm.
Is that one of the reasons why you decided to go down the finance sector? Because till we met, I didn't realise that there was different recruiters within certain industries. I just thought if you were a recruiter, you would deal with absolutely like any jobs possible, which I'm sure that there is. What made the decision for you to focus on a particular sector? Was it because there wasn't a gap in the market, or there was a gap in the market for that, or was it because those people are so hard to find and engage with?
It was what I knew.
Okay.
I think if you listen to most people, they'll say stick to what you know,
stick
to what you're good at.
Yeah.
So that was the reason why we've continued to specialise in accountancy and finance recruitment. When I spoke to people and when I was researching the possibility of launching my own business, we were looking at various brand names. And actual fact, the consistent feedback that I got from people was that people know me and would buy into me. So that was why, although it was a little bit uncomfortable at the start, my name is still above the door. And we specialise in that sector because that was what we know and what we've done. There is absolutely different models for recruitment businesses. You get generalists who cover every single discipline to a little degree. You get extreme specialists, which will focus on a very, very niche area. Perhaps it's more common within IT. And then you get high volume, low margin operators, people that will predominantly look at temporary supply and temporary labour and work on volume rather than value of placements.
So with working in the finance industry, is there certain things that, does it offer its own unique challenges where it's different to recruiting with other sectors? Are there certain things, so if I was recruiting, say, for an FD or for an accountant or something like that, what are the kind of things that I should look for within a recruitment company so that they are specialists within finance? Yeah,
I think it's probably, as with most recruitment businesses, it comes down to the quality of the consultant that you're dealing with. So the business is often only as good as its staff. So look at the length of service of their consultants that you're dealing with. Do they really understand the technical competencies that are required to find you a good finance director or a good accountant? And it's, I suppose, my business degree helped me. There were accounting modules in that, so I've come to learn in making bad hiring decisions myself that not everybody has that knowledge of accountancy, which you assume should be there, but often isn't. So if you really want to understand the technical proficiencies of a finance director, a tax and treasury manager, which we're recruiting for at the minute, you've got to know your stuff in terms of the sector.
I imagine it is like, especially like within some of the roles that I imagine if they're very specialised, it's hard to find those people, like you say, find them, engaging with them, and then get them to go through that. So when it comes with recruitment within finance, is there certain things that, like organisations that you join to keep you like separate from the pack, or I'm trying to find the right words to get my point across. It's more like, so is there sorry, that's a really funny thing. I've got it on the tip of my brain, but I find it really hard to say. So when it comes to recruiting specifically, like for finance, is it just a case of you putting ads out there and waiting for them to come in, or do you always have a bank of people that you're trying to get, or is there certain networking events that you can go to where you rely to meet those people? Because obviously it's a very like targeted sector. You know, I imagine there's a lot of accountants out there, but there's not many people who, you know, for example, specialise in R&D claims, etc. So how do you go about sourcing those type of people? Because I imagine it is like problematic and challenging.
I think there's a multitude of approaches, and it requires different techniques according to the particular role. Advertising is particularly effective, but your adverts have got to really speak to the reader. I think if one of the pieces of advice I could give to people listening to this podcast is actually when you are writing a recruitment advert is think about the reader. I think too many recruitment adverts are when they come from the company themselves, perhaps have been written by their marketing manager who wants to tell the reader all about their business's successes and gains and wins. And actually the real question that you should be asking is, so what? Does it pass the so what test? And what's in it for me? If you're potentially looking to change your career, you want an advert that passes the so what test and what's in it for me. Does the advert speak to me that in the language that I want to speak to. So advertising we use, we absolutely have a reputation and a database of pre-qualified candidates that's been developed probably in the 15 years that I've been within the industry. So people will reach out to me. A great example of that this week. We have some specific background and knowledge in the credit management sector.
Yep.
You referenced kind of qualifications a little bit earlier, and I'm a member of the Chartered Institute of Credit Managers, which isn't accounting qualifications, it's specific to the credit management sector. And so beyond the recruitment qualifications I hold, I'm a member and publicity officer for the Chartered Institute of Credit Managers in the North East. That, I suppose, gives me a unique insight into that particular profession. So one of the areas of finance recruitment they're quite well known for is credit management.
Yep.
As a result of being in that sphere, we've dealt with some really unique and interesting appointments of late. We've worked with businesses to recruit global credit and collections managers, where we wouldn't ordinarily be noticed for those size of organisations, multi-billion pound Teesside based businesses. As a result of that, I've organised something which I felt was good to give back to the credit management profession, which is the North East Credit Managers Forum. That convenes twice a year and brings together the senior credit professionals from both SME and the corporate world within the North East. It's a roundtable discussion that's designed to facilitate learning and development and understanding, and to share ideas and best practice and knowledge, and it will bring together people who are at a senior level and working towards manager level to learn from their peers and their counterparts. That's been in operation for about 7 years. We've got the next event, actually, might as well give it a bit of a plug, is coming up on the 14th of March, and that's going to be hosted by Northgate for us. Recent events, last September's event was hosted by Sage. PricewaterhouseCoopers in Newcastle hosted the one prior to that. So it's a good forum that I think it provides professionals and that industry with a unique platform to share knowledge and to learn from counterparts. As a result of that, one of the things that I've identified in that particular arena is there's a lack of emerging talent for credit professionals. Perhaps if you're a credit control, I suppose, to a degree, is a little bit like recruitment. Often you fall into it rather than choosing a career in it. Typically, if you're a credit controller, you fall into it because you enjoy speaking to people on the phone. But those people will often be encouraged by financial controllers, finance directors, if they want to advance their career, and if that person sees some development and progression within them to go down the accounting technician route. So you go down and you do the AAT, and then you find out actually you want to become an accountant and not a credit manager. So the provision for the CICM qualifications in the North East was not existing. And I've worked with Northern Skills, obviously a merger of Middlesbrough College and North East Chamber of Commerce, for about the last 2 years, and they are just about to launch credit management apprenticeships, which will hopefully bring on the next generation of credit controllers, who will then in turn become the next generation of credit managers. So I thought it was important to develop and nurture talent and skills in that area.
And those both things are doing it from both ends of the spectrum, really. Like, I'm a big fan of talking to people who've already done it or are in a position where you want to be. And obviously for the North East Credit Forum, that's a fantastic opportunity for anybody in that industry to go in and speak to people who have got, experience like on top of themselves. So I imagine it's like an incredible opportunity on that end of it, for people who are already in the industry. But going back to obviously setting up with Northern Skills, investing in the future like that is a bit of a thing that I think every business should really look to. And I think more and more people that we talk to are seeing gaps in their industry where they're just not getting the talent coming through anymore. I was having a conversation the other day about how hard it is to get, since the demise of ICI and things like that, when like methanol plants and stuff like that, even though there are a lot of businesses now coming over from China because to look to us, but there's no generation of people here to do it. So it's people who are like 65 and things like that who are getting called up out of retirement because there's the gap there, because obviously, the industry is, I suppose, declining. But we have noticed things from other industries where the gaps in it is because people aren't kind of being shuttled towards those industries. Do you think it's starting to have a bit of a change? I know it might be a bit locally, but where people are now starting to think towards careers towards the end process of jobs, and maybe it's going a bit full circle where it's coming back to like apprenticeships and training as a way to go rather than go to university. That I'm speaking within Teesside.
Yeah, I think I was of the generation of the probably Tony Blair education, and funneled down the university route without really giving consideration to where I was going. It was just the natural path for somebody at probably our mutual age. But absolutely, I'm a massive believer in learning on the job and apprentices. And if you look at accountants, you get very good accountants who've gone down the academic university route, and you get very good accountants who've gone down the vocational AAT route. I think there is an increase in presence. You've obviously got the degree level apprenticeships now as well, so people can work towards and attain degree level qualifications through a vocational apprenticeship. So I think that's an improving and it will benefit business.
Yeah, completely. Obviously, education is always important with any sector. Well, a tidbit that you gave me recently that I didn't realise within finance is that people can just set up shop to be an accountant. I know that's a very basic way of putting it, but there's like chartered accountants and non-chartered accountants, etc. So that's something that I don't think like the general public, especially people who are in startup industries, really know. When it comes to finance and in general, if you were, say, a startup that's now looking at somebody to handle your finances, what kind of advice would you give to somebody who was going down that route? Either hiring an accountant off-site, where what should they look for in the first account, or hire at the point where they think, right, we really need to bring this in-house. Is there any tips that you would give for them, or things to look out for?
Yeah, I think if you're a startup business, you'll typically need your end-of-year accounts and tax returns doing.
Yep.
I think that would probably always be handled by a chartered accountant. So you're looking for either a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales or the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. Typically, if you want your receipts handled and your kind of day-to-day or weekly, monthly transactions in a nice orderly pile, then you'll probably need to employ the services of a bookkeeper. In my opinion, it's always a good seal of approval for that bookkeeper to be at least AAT qualified. It's the Association of Accounting Technicians, and the AAT also have licensed practitioners. So you don't have to be a member of a chartered accounting body. You can be a licensed practitioner from the AAT, which again is more of a generally considered a bookkeeping qualification, a very good bookkeeping qualification. You can offer the full range of accounting services that a chartered accountant would, but generally you would find most bookkeepers who might come into your business for a couple of hours a week would be AAT, and somebody that's going to prepare your end-of-year accounts or tax returns, or certainly somebody that's going to undertake an audit would, in my opinion, be well placed if they were a qualified chartered accountant.
Oh, fantastic. Now we'll go on and move on and talk a little bit more about business in Teesside. What we mentioned on our previous episode is that the number of startups within Teesside is the highest of anywhere in the UK currently, for many different factors that we have. But one of the great things that we've noticed within business in Teesside is how it goes hand in hand with creating good for the community. Obviously, Dave Roberts was on our previous episode, and he uses his enterprises to help, not only Middlesbrough, but there was obviously Hartlepool and the other great things that you mentioned in the previous episode. But not a lot of people shout about the great work they do. But I know Paul Card Recruitment does do a lot of great work, especially within the local community. So I'm going to kind of put a gun to your head and make you tell the people about the great work you do, because it really is incredible.
Yeah, thank you. It's nice to if you say that. Part of our annual business plan is always to give a percentage of our profits back to local charity. For many years we supported the Butterwick, and for the last 12 months we've been supporting the activities of the Middlesbrough and Teesside Philanthropic Foundation. If you talk about spotting gaps in a market, we saw that the foundation didn't have an annual quiz. So something that we suggested. It's one of those, a quiz night. Everybody loves a quiz night, but when you're getting it going, you're thinking, will it really work? Will it really be well attended? But last year we had 120 people at the Riverside Football Ground for an evening quiz. Delighted that Barclays were there, and they were able to offer some match funding. So in terms of the profits that we raised for the foundation, it was just over 2,200 on the on the night, which was good. And they were keen for us to do one again this year. So another shameless plug then. Thursday the 17th 15th of May is the next date for the Middlesbrough and Teesside Philanthropic and Paul Card Recruitment Quiz at the Riverside Football Ground again, 7:30 start for 8 p.m.
Can anybody come?
Yes, we expect probably a lot of teams that entered last year to be there again this year, but we are looking to increase the capacity probably to about potentially 160, maybe even 180 people this year. So
that's incredible.
The more people are there, the more funds we raise for the foundation.
It is, yeah, and it is, it's a great, not only to do for the community, but it is a great networking opportunity to be there, because a lot of businesses obviously will be there, and there's the social aspect to it as well. So I did want to briefly touch on networking, because when people start a business with, one of the first things that they're told is one of the best ways to do marketing is networking. The classic quote is, your network is your net worth, or I can't remember who said it, but it's roughly around there. I know that you do quite a bit of networking within like the North East and Teesside and stuff like that. Generally, people seem to have a love it or hate it experience with networking. I think it's a great thing personally. But would you give any tips for people, or what do you think of the networking scene in Teesside? Do you think it's a good thing, a bad thing? Do you do it specifically within your industry? Or
I enjoy networking. I absolutely think it's Marmite. You're absolutely right. People either love it or hate it. People either go along and get a lot out of it, but some people are just forced to go there and think it's just a general business activity. And if you're a business development manager for a company, then it's a nice few hours out the office.
Yeah.
Personally, the one tip I would give is, regardless of the networking, it's all in the follow-up.
Yeah.
It's absolutely pointless engaging with somebody and not following up. So really, one tip to make successful networking is follow up.
Yeah.
In terms of how to do that and how to engage with people, I've noticed and that people do not go to networking to buy.
Yeah.
So don't sell.
Yeah.
Is a key tip. I think if you look for ways that that you can help people, they may be more encouraged to help you. Yes, in terms of the networking that we do, we've been a member of BNI for coming up 5 years. It's been successful for us. It's been developmental for me. That's absolutely a Marmite organisation as well. People either love it or people hate it.
Yep.
But I think it gives you a lot of good foundations that you can apply not only to your business life, but to your personal life, and certainly to your networking success as well. So that's worked for us.
Yeah, again, that's the perfect analogy for it, is Marmite. One of the things that I do think people have kind of got it a bit backwards sometimes when it comes to networking is they do think it's a selling opportunity. I'm going to take business cards, there's going to be 10 to 50 people in the room, they're all going to get one, I'm going to sell my service to each one of them. I think sometimes people, like, a hidden thing that they kind of get is it sometimes does put you in the room with people who you could learn a lot from. They might not buy anything from your business, but they could give you, like, untold advice on how to start. And when we, let's be honest, when we do start up our own business, it is an incredibly confusing time. Like myself, when I started, I didn't have for example, a business degree. Did you notice that there was much of a carryover between what they said in a university business degree to when you started? Did it help you get or was it kind of, you some of it I imagine was very helpful. Other bits probably maybe not so much.
I think, a generic business degree was just that, quite generic. You understand a little bit about company formation, you understand a little bit about accounting, you might understand a little bit about business law, but there was a reasonable gap between my degree education and actually starting up the business.
Yeah.
So maybe some of it had faded in the memory.
Yeah.
What I understand from now is there are very commercially orientated degrees, degrees that I see on people's CVs, degrees in commercial enterprise, which are purely focused around being an entrepreneur and being a business owner, which I think is a great thing because, as you rightly said, within the Teesside community and within the UK, we've got a tremendous amount of startups.
Yeah.
One of the things that obviously my industry as recruitment comments on is the absolute shift in those people in post-16 education or indeed at GCSE level that actually have that specific ambition to own their own business.
Yeah.
Shows like The Apprentice have absolutely been the catalyst towards that. People no longer think that owning a business is a preserve of the rich or wealthy. It's something that everybody can go out and do. And with Dragon's Den, The Apprentice, shows like that, people in education, there's been a seismic shift in the amount of people wanting to ultimately be their own boss.
Which is fantastic. what advice would you give to people who are starting, both in a generic sense of somebody starting their own business and somebody who's looking to start their own recruitment business? Is the differences there, or?
I think so. I think in terms of generic advice is ask questions.
Yeah.
Never be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
There is a huge amount of help and support out there if you know where to look and in the right places, and if you speak to the right people. I think if somebody offers you their time and they're experienced in business, take that opportunity. Because most people that I've come across are pretty willing to share their successes and equally the mistakes that they've made, and we've all made those along the way. I personally would suggest get a business coach. That was something that I didn't do for the first couple of years, and then for the last few years we've used the services of a guy who I'll give a mention to, Steve Paget. His business is PCF Solutions.
Fantastic bloke. We also know him.
Chartered accountant, but he specialises in working with business owners to grow those businesses. His advice is simple, straightforward, but it was actually at a networking event with the Entrepreneurs Forum that really put the seed of why don't I have a coach. You look at the top sports people, and everybody employs a coach, often multiple coaches. So why would you go into business and not train to be a better business person? And it was that kind of analogy that really planted that seed, and I thought, absolutely, I need to get myself a coach. Went and spoke to a few, tried a few different ones before I found that Steve was the right partner for me. In terms of your question on recruitment and starting up a recruitment business, I think you absolutely should be a member of a trade body. That is hugely helpful to put in the right infrastructure within your business. They're extremely useful in terms of giving you terms and conditions for sale, all the appropriate documentation that you'll need to run an efficient and compliant recruitment business.
Well, that's a fantastic bit. Going back to business coaches as well, it's something that I thoroughly believe in as well. Like you say, we take coaches and teachers for everything. You know, if you want to learn to drive, you get a coach. If you want to learn to play the guitar, you get a coach. Obviously, there's some people who are self-taught. All the way through our lives, we have teachers that tell us to do it, but then I think it might be a little bit of ego. We think, well, I'm going to be my own boss. I'm going to do it my way, kind of thing. I think a good benefit if you get a business coach is there is, success leaves clues, and they are having a second pair of eyes that can step back and have a look at the big picture is very, very, worthwhile. And there are some fantastic resources in Teesside of people being able to do it. Obviously, you mentioned Steve previously, but Steve will actually give a free hour for, anybody who comes over and have a look at their business. But it is absolutely invaluable. So when it comes to startup businesses in Teesside, there's many reasons, why we've got it. A lot of people think, obviously, there's the decline in industry and SSI, etc., in the local area. So jobs, people, there's less amount of jobs. People think, well, I'm going to have to do it for myself, which is a great thing. Do you think it's going to be one of those things that's going to be sustainable, or is it just in the current climate? Do you think that we're going to become an area of entrepreneurs and it's just going to keep growing and growing and growing? People keep investing, there's you mentioned the Teesside Philanthropic Foundation, but obviously the owner of them did the borehole buildings and stuff, and Andy Preston. Do you think it's going to be something that keeps growing, or do you think it's just because of the circumstances in the current area and we're just responding to it?
I think it's a bit of both. I think we've got a fantastic digital sector. I think it's perhaps a shift in what I mentioned earlier, people going through the educational system with the full intention of being a business owner. The skills that are required to be successful perhaps in the digital sector can be taught. How well they'll be perfected is the test of time. But essentially, somebody leaving university now, can build a website. So you can build a website design business. Quite how successful that business would be maybe comes with experience. And you look at the SSI task force that was set up. Clearly, a key part of that deliverables was to help people into business. So that's had a successful impact on the number of startups in the Teesside area as a result of the SSI closure and the SSI task force. Is it sustainable? I'd like to think so. I think we're a really collaborative business community.
I would agree with that.
I think there's enough support and advice out there for people to do well.
Yeah.
I think we've got some great incubation zones within the Tees Valley, Boho, obviously, as you mentioned, being one of them. So, yeah, I'd like to see that our entrepreneurial spirit continues and thrives.
Yeah, I highly agree. Point they hit on there, obviously, is that there is a great community and everybody does like to help each other out. I was in a meeting previously today and somebody highlighted a point to me that I'd heard before, but it drifted out of memory, is that when you do actually buy from a local business, it's not just putting money in that person's pocket. You know, we all use different suppliers, and generally the suppliers that you use are small to medium businesses, self-employed people within Teesside, who they in turn use more local suppliers and they feed their families with it. So when you do use a local business, you are really giving back to the community, and it is something that is unbelievably strong in Teesside. There seems to be such a flip-flop thing when people either say that, you know, you've got some people who are unfortunately a little bit misguided, but say the place is a dump and, you know, it's a terrible place to live, etc. And then you've got, on the other hand, they're incredibly proud of where they come from and the good that we do. A great tidbit that you told me there, which I find absolutely phenomenal, was that the Middlesbrough are now number 9 in the top cities to invest in.
Yeah, I believe that there's just been a report published by the Financial Times looking at the small cities within Europe. So obviously we're not a city, but I think a small city in their definition is less than 1.5 million in terms of local population. And Middlesbrough has just been ranked 9th out of the top 10 European cities to invest in. So I think that's proof that we have the infrastructure, skills and base to be a sound investment decision for companies.
That is incredible when you think about it. Like, it's, some people might dismiss it, but you think of the top 9 cities in Europe, like that's a large thing to be a part of. And obviously we want to attract more investors to Teesside. 2 things that I want to talk about when it comes to investment in Teesside is, firstly, what do you think we need to do as a community to attract more investors? And the secondly is actually talking about the investment culture in Teesside. Now, it's different from other places in the country, but we'll first just touch on what do you think we've got to do as a community to draw more outside investment in? Is it a case of we need to shout more about our wins here, or, you know, work together to form parties, etc., that can go out and find that?
I think we're doing quite well. I think if you look at the recent investments that we've won, businesses like Sirius Minerals choosing to set up in Teesside in the Tees Valley. I was at a dinner recently and was talking to the management team of Green Lizard. Green Lizard are a Belfast-based business that have just about to put a £6 million investment into a trial manufacturing plant at Wilton. And if you look at the reasons those businesses chose to invest in the Tees Valley, it's because of the skill base in manufacturing and process sector. So we can continue to capitalise upon that. We've obviously got a developing digital base, and if we can continue to develop those skills and attract inward investment in those areas, I think the challenge there is that that's perhaps more of a transient industry, a little bit like banking and financial services. It's very easy to pick it up and move it elsewhere. If you look at the process and chemical manufacturing sector, then if you've got a significant capital investment in a manufacturing plant, it's perhaps a little bit more tricky to move it elsewhere. What do we need to do to continue to attract investment, I think, is the things that we're already doing. I think that the devolution deal for the Tees Valley and the introduction of a mayor was a good move. I think that we have shown much greater collaborative approach. I know we've already touched on that, but if you look at our neighbours up in the north of the region, then some of the local authorities wanted it, some of it didn't, and now we've perhaps taken first mover advantage, if you like, in being one of the first devolved areas to have the powers of a local mayor. And as I understand it, Ben Houchin is the only mayor outside of London with specific powers around economic regeneration. I think that what we need to do to capitalise upon that is for those parties to work together in a more sustainable combined approach. I think obviously the difficulty you've got is, Conservative mayor and Labour-controlled councils, so maybe have different agendas. And I'd like to think, I think the mayor put forward some great agenda points. Whether he can deliver on all of those, or whether this is just the start and the seed for an improved transport and infrastructure. The fact that we have, the A19 running through the whole of the region, not just Tees Valley, and that's, still only dual carriageway, I think is a major issue that needs to be addressed. Clearly, we've got the asset of the Durham Tees Valley Airport on our local doorsteps, but I think that needs to be utilised more.
Dave was talking about in our previous episode how he's one of the things that they're looking at, and friends of his, is like obviously trying to back to save the airport, and it is like crucial to looking at not just the short term but the long term investment within Teesside. If we're going to grow, then we need that airport for many other reasons.
I think it would be great to come under Teesside based control. Clearly Peel airports are will have their own agenda, and ultimately they will decide what happens with the future of that asset in Teesside, but it would be great for it to see it used for the benefit of the local community.
One of the other things I just want to talk briefly on, especially when it comes to investment and investing in businesses, the culture that we have in business startups and investment is very different to when we look at even other cities, and as far as sometimes Newcastle and Leeds and things like that. A lot of people, when they go, especially in the tech space and digital, is when they do business startups, the first thing that they do is look to raise funding, where people in Teesside are kind of the opposite in that, where it's kind of an afterthought for them, and they just start and like obviously think about funding at a later date. Do you think that it's a good thing that we should keep that going, because it allows people to grow organically? It is their business; they remain in complete control. Or do you think that we should follow suit of just the startup world as a whole, to try and in fact attract venture capitalists and angel investors and things like that into the region? Do you think that it would be benefit? I know we're speaking in very broad and general terms here, but it's something that I've noticed. The more and more people that I speak to, if you go somewhere else, their first thought is, oh, well, how are we going to raise capital? Where here, it's kind of, well, I've got $5,000 in the bank, that'll cover my rent on my shop for X amount of time. Let's just go and figure it out along the way. Do you think we need a bit of both? Or?
I think it comes down to a scale-up mentality, and ultimately whether your business is just a job and is your income, or whether you're actually looking to grow and build something more sizable. So I think the challenge for a lot of local businesses will be skill, and to do that often will require investment. I think we've got some really good local investment fund managers that are keen to invest. When I speak to business relationship managers from local banks, they are keen to lend, and their doors are open to help support local businesses and local growth. But it would be good, again, I've mentioned the Entrepreneurs Forum in the past, that they have specific mentoring and designed around that scale-up challenge. So it's how you could take a business from effectively a micro-sized business to something that is bigger, and to do that often will require some form of investment.
It is, and I think especially when it comes along, going back to what we've discussed earlier, it's not just the investment, but it's having the right investors that they can help you and be a mentor to you. Obviously, a lot of people, they may be the world's best butcher, for example, and have a small butcher shop, but then they realise that they want to scale and be open multiple shops or whatever it may be, or move into certain sectors. That's a skill all of its own, and scaling like that, like obviously it comes to finance and things like that, but the world's greatest butcher might not necessarily mechanically minded to be able to do that. So I think going back to your original point of sometimes like investors in your business can actually help you bring in those skill sets.
Yeah, absolutely. Often when you've taken on investment, those fund managers will want the confidence of a qualified chartered accountant at the helm, who is giving them regular management accounting and forecast information, so they can actually see how their investment is being managed. That's often one of the businesses that we help, businesses that are looking at growth and a growth strategy, and how do they bring in the right level of financial management skills to number one, attract the investment, and number two, manage the investment and ultimately facilitate their growth ambitions.
We would love, by the way, if anybody's listened who is a venture capitalist or anything like that, we would love to have you on the podcast and listen to it, because there is such a split kind of opinion of which way would be the best way for businesses. One thing that I do like to ask people who come in is more of an entrepreneurial question rather than like a Teesside based question. But there seems to be a stark opposing opinion where some people believe that everybody can be an entrepreneur. Though, an entrepreneurs in it, everybody, as long as you have a passion or a skill set that you can do. Or some people believe that, entrepreneurs are just a certain type of people. I personally think, from what I've seen, is that there's certain personality traits that are very, very common amongst entrepreneurs. Something that you mentioned before is like work-life balance, with a smile on your face, and there was a smile on mine, because anyone who's ever started up a company or who is a business owner realises that that's a very, very hard thing to maintain. And it's something that I want to come back to and talk to you about, because obviously we are, family men, and we always share the tales of dadhood, shall we say. But have you ever thought about it in that kind of sense?
I have, I suppose, because some people would see me as an entrepreneur. I don't necessarily see me as that. I see me probably as a business owner. I think personally the definition of entrepreneur is somebody who's a serial entrepreneur, and has multiple ideas, and is constantly thinking of new ideas and growing businesses quickly. I think that for me, so what does that mean? It's probably the appetite for risk. And I think a classic trait of entrepreneurs and serial entrepreneurs who start multiple businesses is their acceptance and of risk, and their attitude towards it. I think I'm probably a fairly risk averse type person, and that's probably why I see myself as probably a business owner rather than necessarily an entrepreneur. I think my heart is in recruitment. It always will be. Do I have any burning desires to open something that is absolutely not recruitment related? No, I probably don't.
There's no Paul Card kangaroo farm on the horizons or anything like that?
No, nothing weird and wacky, no.
I think that having that level of self-awareness is really important, though, and knowing the difference for yourself, and going back to like scaling and things like that. There is a thing where if you do decide to become a business owner, that you should scale as fast as possible and things like that. Where necessarily, like I was talking this again with Dave Roberts, is something I plan on asking everybody, is having that self-awareness to think, well, actually, I don't want 400 branches, or I don't want this. What I want to be is this size. Obviously, everybody wants, like, let's be honest, we're in it for money. We do want to have, like, provide a nice life for our families and things like that. But being self-aware, I don't actually have to scale this insanely. I can, I know where I want to be, and I think that's a very hard thing for entrepreneurs or business owners when they start.
It is. I think lots of people will set up a business because it's a lifestyle choice, and looking for that flexibility. That was probably my mindset originally, that if I could replace the level of income that I enjoyed when I was permanently employed, that would be sufficient. It quickly and probably unplanned became a life of its own. And now there is a short-term, medium and long-term plan that we're working towards and on track to achieve that. But then you realise that if you're going to find that work-life balance with a business that has grown, then the challenge is managing yourself out of the business, and having a business that doesn't solely rely on you. That's the scale-up challenge.
Obviously, I want to talk about that, when it comes to work-life balance, and we both smiling when we say it, because for most people that I speak to, that they talk about, I want to start a business because I want to do things on my own time and I want more freedom and things like that. But what seems to happen in nearly every case of every successful business that I've seen is that those people are terrible at work-life balance, and there probably is no balance. And what happens is they generally end up working 70, 80, 90 hours a week instead of the 37 and a half hours that they were before. And that's one of the factors, is that you end up doing something that you're very passionate about and want to grow yourself, especially if you have your name above the door. It's your reputation on the line, which is great because it just shows that paramount the incredible service that you give. But Do you think that when you become a business owner, that's a bit of not a myth? I don't want to say that because that's not true. But a challenging thing for a lot of people. I know I personally find it challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. In the first few years, I rarely took a holiday.
Yeah.
And if I did, then I would probably set aside a few hours every single day to work.
Yeah.
Because the phone didn't stop ringing, the emails don't stop coming in, and when it's just you, there's nobody else to deal with those problems. Fortunately, we've moved beyond that stage now, and I think it's work-life integration rather than work-life balance now that I think people kind of need to appreciate and strive for. So it's the things like being able to attend the Christmas nativity at 9:30 on a Friday morning. And I think that you don't have to be a business owner to have that freedom and flexibility. The staff that we employ know that family comes first, and if the little ones are sick, then I don't expect them to be enough work. I absolutely expect them to be able to attend the little ones' sports days because that's important for them. And I think if you can motivate and engage the people that work for you and the staff that you employ with that same work-life integration, that is paid back in their effort and their endeavours tenfold. Because inevitably we work in an industry where people expect to be able to communicate with you outside of their normal working hours. And therefore it's very common for us to hold conversations, reply to emails, meet people outside of the normal 9 to 5. So therefore if I expect me to do that, and potentially if the team that we employ want to do that, then that whole work-life integration is absolutely key. And I think that's where smaller independent businesses can win versus a large corporate business. Large corporate businesses will often find that level of freedom and flexibility and responsibility a challenge, but that's one of the things that smaller businesses can offer.
I agree completely. I do want to come back to talk about culture in businesses in a couple of minutes. One thing that I wanted to keep on there with, obviously, is fatherhood and owning your own business. I started my own business and then became a father, and thankfully I have an incredibly supportive wife who puts up with my insanity, but I was completely honest from the start. She knew what a lunatic I was before, we met, but then but when obviously our daughter came along, she was like, right, we need more time now, which is completely understandable, and I'm so glad that she does, because thankfully I was there for every single one of my daughter's firsts. That's more of a timing thing than a plan thing, obviously. Everything goes to plan with children. Did you start the business before your first child came along?
No, after. After. And it was actually because Jude, who's now 5.5, was a really difficult baby. And we were on that treadmill of... did she make it out of the house that day? And I wanted to be able to support Andrea a little more, and didn't want to not see him and be a weekend dad. So that was the driver for me. I did achieve that, and one of the things that was really nice that I enjoyed, actual fact, in that year before Jude started full-time school, I made it a commitment to the family that I would work a 9-day fortnight and take every Thursday afternoon off. That happened to be the day that my wife was off as well, so we had a family afternoon every single Thursday. I accepted that the business didn't grow during that period, but that was a sacrifice I was prepared to make, and it's one that I'd like to make a commitment to for my 18-month-old daughter as well, that she gets that same kind of time with daddy that Jude enjoyed. And I think that's where as a business owner you get that freedom and flexibility. But if any of my team wanted to come and talk to me about that same level of flexibility, we employ part-time staff, and when we were specifically were looking for a part-time member of staff recently, we were absolutely explicit that it was a family-friendly post, and that the working hours were available to suit the needs of a working parent, and we were inundated with applications.
I imagine you were kind of, we're going to have a bit of crossover here, but like talking about culture, that the generally in large corporations isn't that leeway, and the number of people who are crying out for that flexibility is, it will change, I think, as time goes on, and people will realise that they can be a lot more flexible with their employees. It was one of the things that I think people do struggle with when they start their own business, is that, especially when you have a young child, I was torn personally. You want to grow your business. You want not only feed your own family, but obviously the families that you employ. You're responsible for them as well, same as yourself. So you were kind of torn that I wanted to be with my daughter, and it was my first child, my young child, as much as possible. But also I knew that if I didn't put the work in, then I wouldn't achieve the results that I wanted to, purely for her, and so she could have things later in life. I think no one really talks, especially I don't think anybody talks about it for businessmen or businesswomen. It must be. I would love to have businesswomen on there to get their opinion on it as well. And thankfully, we're going to have some great ones come in. But that must be, the pressure on them must be even harder, because they get completely different. They're supposed to, and my wife has it, and your own wife has it. They're supposed to have a career, but also somehow be a stay-at-home best mum in the world, and it's such a conflicting thing.
Yeah, I think companies are getting better at offering the same equal opportunities to men to work flexibly, and there is a better understanding nowadays that a father figure is a really important part of the makeup of a family. I've seen companies where they will offer sabbaticals and shared paternity rights and maternity rights for fathers and mothers, which I think is great. I think it is still an absolute fact that it's mum that more often than not is expected to stay at home and look after the little one and reduce hours, and perhaps the career does go on hold. I think one of the challenges I see is that a lot of people that might be looking to change their career, that confide in me, that work part-time and are looking for another part-time job, it's really hard to find. When we advertise on behalf of clients that we work with, and we'll advertise part-time roles, and where there's that family flexibility, we'll be absolutely inundated with applications, because it's really, really difficult to find. Often what happens in my experience is that part-time working hours come as a result of a life change whilst you've been working with a business. You started as a full-time member of staff, you're a valued member of that team, there's some kind of life event, it's usually a child, and therefore the business accepts that rather than to lose you, they'll accept part-time working hours. But to then go and replicate, for example, if you're a finance director or a financial controller, and a real high earner perhaps, to replicate part-time working hours in that same level of responsibility and remuneration is a challenge.
It is, and it's good to see that companies are coming around to that way of thinking as well as time goes on, and not only within parenting and things like that, but investing in the local area. We were having a chat obviously just before you came on here, but you work with some incredible companies that are opening doors and providing jobs for the area. Again, I know you'll never shout about it, so I'm going to highlight it, but you've done some, and continue to do some great work with Quorn, which I don't think a lot of people realise how many. I was shocked to find out how many jobs that they actually have now. Yeah,
absolutely. They reported obviously increase in 16% in sales last year, and a £150 million investment in their Billingham site. Ultimately, that's going to create around about 300 jobs in the wider supply chain, and take their headcount to over 1,000 staff, which is brilliant. It's a brand that people recognise, but absolutely might not recognise that it's on your doorstep in Teesside.
I thought it was just out in Stokesley. I wasn't aware that they had one.
They've got a manufacturing facility in Billingham as well, and then also a sister sites down in Norfolk as well.
So what other companies have you worked with, just to kind of pump your own brand a little bit?
Sure. Our client base really is large corporate to small SME. So last year we worked quite a bit with Venator. Venator used to be the Huntsman Pigments business, and is now a standalone business separate from the Huntsman family in its own right. So their global headquarters are over at Wynyard. They've got a European shared service centre, and the challenge that they find in recruiting staff is that they'll often not only need the technical accounting skills and qualifications that are necessary, but also the languages. So we helped them to recruit over the last 12 months 4 people who were European natives. And that was a challenge because attracting European labour to come to the UK after the announcement of Brexit was more challenging. You've got to really understand that it's not just about the job, it is about the life the culture. You've got to be there as a counsellor to engage those people, help them understand the local area, help them understand where they might live, where they might socialise, what kind of social amenities are available. So yeah, that was some really interesting challenges in terms of European-wide advertising to find European natives for Veneto. And then we work with some smaller businesses that have ambitious growth plans. Really good business called Excel Precision Technologies. They manufacture micro precision components that are ultimately supplied into the medical sector over at Teesside Industrial Estate. Investors in People Award, again another business that has a strong foundation of apprentices. They're looking to significantly scale and size their business. We help them to recruit a full-time head of finance that will hopefully join their management team to facilitate that growth.
Fantastic.
So, yeah, some good businesses.
So if how can people get in touch with you if they're listening to this and they think, you know what, we're wasting a ton of money on a recruitment? Let's be honest, it can be either the greatest thing ever for a business or it can cost a lot of money. I think I can't remember the figure, but you were telling me how much it actually costs to recruit somebody just in training and things like that, and I was really taken aback.
Yeah, the cost of a wrong hiring decision can be colossal. As a minimum, it'll be at least the equivalent salary of that person, but I've seen some more recent reports that suggest it's possibly 3 times the salary that you actually employ the person on.
Especially the level of some of the people that you are recruiting, that's a lot of money for,
especially when ultimately you don't see whether that person will be successful for 6 to 12 months. So it's important to get it right. I think that if I could give any advice, it would be to find the right recruitment partner that we talked about earlier, and really to engage with the recruitment partner in that process. As we talked about, recruitment's often one of those aspects of business that people don't want to engage with. So the more time you spend and the more effort you spend, the more likely you've got chances of getting it right. We won't be the right recruitment partner for every business. I'm not ashamed to say that. There's no problems with that at all. But if a business wanted to speak to me, we'd love to talk to them. I think far too much interaction now in the recruitment world is done by email and hiding behind job board applications. I'm a fan of talking to people. So if they wanted to give us a call, our number is 01740 617 667. That will divert to my mobile. As I say, I'm 24 hours a day. Unfortunately, that work-life integration, absolutely. So if they want a confidential conversation outside of hours, we're happy to do that as well.
Well, fantastic. And also, everybody who's listening, all Paul's details will be linked below in the descriptions on all our platforms. That's fantastic, Paul. Thank you very much for coming in for chat for us.
You're welcome. Good to talk to you.
And that wraps up episode 2 of the Teesside Business Podcast. Thank you very much for listening. If you would like to be on, please just leave a comment in the comment section or inbox us on our Facebook page. The Teesside Business Podcast is produced and promoted by Person to Person Marketing. Thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next one.